The climb has been steep and the path dangerous, but the final ascension is finally within your grasp at the peak. Stay with us as we reach the summit of the story and reveal the ultimate truth. Hit subscribe now and witness the most important ending today.
When your own mother introduces you to her book club friends as my daughter who's still figuring things out, something shifts inside you. Not rage, not tears, just this cold, clear settling. Like a snow globe after someone shakes it and sets it back down. You watch the glitter drift. You remember exactly who said what and how they smiled while saying it. My brother's wedding was held at a vineyard in Sonoma. The kind of place with string lights wrapped around oak barrels and a coordinator who whispers everything like she's in a library. It was beautiful. I'll give my family that. They have always known how to make things look perfect on the outside. I drove up alone from San Francisco, which my aunt noticed immediately. "Still no boyfriend?" she asked, before I'd even set my purse down. She didn't wait for an answer. She had already turned back to the centerpiece she was fussing with, a towering thing of white peonies and eucalyptus that probably cost more than my first car. My brother's name is Julian. He was marrying a woman named Simone, whose family owned 3 car dealerships in Marin County and who had very strong opinions about seating charts. Julian and I used to be close, the kind of close where you finish each other's cereal when you're broke in college and don't keep score. But somewhere around the time he got the promotion and the downtown condo and the fiancé with the car dealership family, we stopped finishing each other's sentences and started finishing each other's patience. My mother had arranged me at a table near the back, which she explained was because I'd RSVP'd late. I hadn't. But I sat there anyway, between a cousin I barely knew and an elderly great-uncle who fell asleep during the salad course, and I watched my family shimmer under the string lights like something from a magazine spread that had nothing to do with me. My name is Simone. I'm 28. For the past 3 years, my family has described me to their friends the way people describe a houseplant they keep forgetting to water, with a vague guilt they've decided isn't their problem. "She's doing her tech thing," my mother would say. Or, "You know, Simone, always in her own world." My father, when he remembered to ask about me at all, would nod at whatever I said and then redirect the conversation to Julian's quarterly bonus. What none of them knew, what I had told no one in my family, was that my tech thing had spent the last 2 years being quietly evaluated by one of the largest enterprise software companies in the country. What none of them knew was that 6 days before Julian's wedding, I had signed paperwork that most people in my industry would describe as life-changing. I didn't tell them because I had learned, slowly and then all at once, that my family was not a safe place to keep hope. The rehearsal dinner was the night before the ceremony, held at a steakhouse in Healdsburg that my future sister-in-law's father had reserved entirely for the occasion. There were maybe 60 people. Open bar. A slideshow of Julian and Sloane through the years. At one point, someone put up a photo of our family from about 10 years ago, Julian and me at maybe 18 and 16, sunburned, squinting at the camera on some beach in the Outer Banks. I looked at that girl in the photo and thought about how much she didn't know yet, about what was coming, about what she was going to have to build by herself. My uncle, my father's older brother, a man who has never once asked me a question about my life that wasn't shaped like a criticism, found me at the bar during the cocktail hour. He was on his second bourbon. I could tell because he gets a certain looseness around the jaw, a confidence that has nothing to do with actual confidence. "So what are you doing these days?" he asked. The way he asked it, you'd think the question was a favor. "Software," I said. "Still?" He laughed in a way that included people nearby without technically speaking to them. "I thought you were going to pivot to something stable. Your cousin Derek just made partner at his firm. You know that." I knew that. I had heard about Derek making partner approximately 11 times in the past 2 months. "That's great for Derek," I said. "You know what your problem is?" My uncle set his glass down like he was about to say something worth remembering. "You were always chasing something that doesn't exist. There's no shortcut, Simone. You want to build an app and get rich overnight. That's not real. That's fantasy." I looked at him for a moment. I thought about the NDA I had signed. I thought about the number on the paperwork I had signed 6 days ago. I thought about the way he'd said "your problem" with such comfortable certainty, the way you talk about a crack in someone else's ceiling. "You're probably right," I said, and I went back to my table. That night I lay in my hotel room and looked at the ceiling for a long time. The vineyard was quiet. Through the window I could see a thin line of light on the hills. I had been waiting for the story to arrive at its ending for 3 years. Longer, if I'm honest. Ever since the night I sat in my apartment in the Sunset District with a whiteboard covered in market gap analysis and thought, for the first time without embarrassment, I think I'm onto something real. The company was called Meridian. We built compliance infrastructure for mid-size healthcare systems, the kind of behind-the-scenes software that nobody glamorizes but that every hospital above a certain size desperately needs. We had 7 employees. We had never raised a traditional venture round. I had funded the first 18 months on savings and a small business loan, and one angel investor named Faye, who was the only person in my life who had ever heard my pitch and said, without hedging, "I think this is going to work." Faye was not at the wedding. She was in Chicago for a conference. I thought about texting her from the hotel room but decided to wait. There would be time to celebrate. Right now I needed to get through the next 24 hours. The wedding ceremony was outdoors, on a flat stretch of grass between 2 rows of olive trees. White chairs, afternoon light coming through in long gold angles, a string quartet playing something classical that I didn't recognize. Julian cried when Sloane walked down the aisle. I wasn't expecting that. It did something in my chest, cracked it open just a little, the way unexpected tenderness does. When you've been bracing yourself for so long you've forgotten you're doing it. My mother sat in the front row. She was wearing a dress the color of champagne, and she had spent the morning having her hair done at a salon in town. She looked beautiful and nervous and proud in that particular way that is mostly about being seen. When the officiant said Julian's full name, Julian Marcus Hale, she pressed one hand over her mouth, and I watched her shoulders shake once, quietly, and I thought, she loves him. She loves me too in her way. The way some people love is just very loud about the things it needs and very quiet about the things it gives. Reception, more champagne, a 5-course meal, a DJ who started too loud and was asked to turn it down twice. My great-uncle woke up for the entree course and seemed genuinely surprised to find himself at a wedding. The speeches started after dinner. Sloane's father, Sloane's maid of honor. Then Julian, who gave a toast to his new wife that was funny and sincere and made everyone laugh in the right places. He thanked my parents. He mentioned his groomsmen by name. He did not mention me. I watched my mother nod along with every word. I watched my father raise his glass at the end. I counted the number of times Julian had looked in my direction since I'd arrived. Twice, not including the ceremony, and both times with the particular expression of someone who has too many things on their plate to fully register what they're looking at. I was not surprised. I had expected this. But expecting something and being untouched by it are different things. I took a sip of my wine and looked out at the olive trees in the dimming light and reminded myself what I had signed 6 days ago and why I had built what I built, and for whom. My phone buzzed. It was a text from my lawyer, a message I had been told to expect, but not necessarily tonight. Public announcement going live at 8 p.m. Pacific per the communications team. Congratulations again, Simone. This is a big one. I looked at the time, 7:43. The speech portion of the evening was winding down. The DJ was being asked to turn the music back up. People were beginning to drift toward the dance floor. I slicked my phone into my clutch and sat very still for a moment. 17 minutes. My aunt appeared at my shoulder. She had the look of a woman who has had just enough wine to say what she normally only thinks. "You know," she said, settling into the chair next to me, "I was talking to your mother earlier. She's worried about you." "I know," I said. "She doesn't say it that way, but, Julian has really built something. The two of you used to be so similar, and now—" She trailed off in a way that was worse than if she'd finished the sentence. "We're still similar," I said quietly. She patted my hand. "Of course you are, honey. My father came to find me not long after. He sat down with a kind of effortful cheerfulness, the way he does when he's decided to be a good dad for a specific and measurable amount of time. You doing all right over here?" "Fine," I said. "It's a beautiful wedding." "It is." He looked out at the dance floor where Julian was spinning Sloane and laughing. "He did good, didn't he?" It wasn't a question. It was a door opening so I could agree and then we could both feel okay. "He did," I said. My father nodded, satisfied. He started to say something about the wine, something about the vineyard, the varietal, the price of Sonoma property. And then my phone buzzed again, and then again, and then in a way that was becoming continuous. I pulled it out. 22 notifications. 30. LinkedIn. Email. A message from a journalist at TechCrunch I had spoken to 3 weeks ago about an unrelated story. The announcement was live. The headline, which I would read in full about an hour later, said, Luminary Systems acquires healthcare compliance startup Meridian in $340 million deal year. Founder Simone, 28, becomes youngest woman to exit a bootstrapped company above $300 million in software history. I set my phone face down on the white tablecloth. I took a breath. My father was still talking about Sonoma property values. Dad, I said, the lot sizes alone in this area you're talking about. Dad. He stopped. He looked at me with the slightly irritated patience of someone interrupted during a thought they were proud of. I need to take a call, I said. Now? It's Julian's. It's important. I walked out past the olive trees and around the side of the vineyard building into a small parking area lit by a single floodlight. The air smelled like dry grass and warm wood. I called my lawyer back first, then Faye. Faye screamed. Literally screamed, a full sound of joy, and I laughed in a way I hadn't in months. A clean laugh, no edges. When I walked back in, something had changed. I don't know who saw what first. The wedding coordinator was looking at her phone near the entrance. 2 of Julian's friends from college, both in tech, both with ears to the ground, were talking in the corner with an intensity that had nothing to do with the open bar. One of them looked up when I walked past and did a visible double take. Simone, he said. Simone Hale? That's me, I said. The Meridian Simone Hale? I didn't answer exactly. I smiled and kept walking. By the time I sat back down at my table, my phone had 140 notifications. My great-uncle had fallen back asleep. My cousin, not Derek, a different one, younger, who had always been kind to me, leaned across the table and said in a low voice, Is that you? On TechCrunch right now? Yes, I said. Her eyes went wide. She looked like she wanted to say something that was bigger than the words available to her. My aunt appeared. Then my mother's closest friend from the book club. Then, in a way that I had not planned and did not orchestrate but also, honestly, was not surprised by my mother. She had her phone in her hand. She was looking at the screen and then at me and then at the screen. Her champagne-colored dress seemed suddenly not quite right for the person she was trying to present as she stood there in front of me, recalibrating in real time. Is this true? She asked. Yes, I said. 340 million, I said. Yes. She made a sound I had never heard her make before. Not a word, just a sound. My father was behind her. He had been mid-conversation with someone when he was pulled away, and he still had that half-finished look on his face, the look of a sentence left open. He read the headline over my mother's shoulder. His mouth moved without making sound. Julian found me about 20 minutes later, when the news had moved through the reception the way news does, first in whispers, then in glances, then in the frank open stares of people who stopped pretending they're not paying attention. He came through the small crowd that had accumulated near my table. His bow tie was slightly loosened. He had been dancing. He looked at me for a long moment. Simone, he said. Hi, I said. Why didn't you? He stopped. Started again. How long have you known? 6 days, I said. I didn't want to take anything away from today. He looked at me like he was trying to find the version of me he had been storing in his memory, the one that didn't fit the headline on everyone's phones and couldn't locate it. You built that yourself? The whole company? 7 employees, I said. 4 years. He nodded slowly. Then he said something I didn't expect. I didn't know. I know you didn't, I said. No one asked. That landed. I watched it land. Julian is not a bad person. He just grew up in the same family I did, the one that organized itself around whoever made the most noise. And he had made more noise than me for as long as we'd both been alive. So the spotlight had followed him, and neither of us had ever questioned whether that was fair. He hugged me then at his own wedding reception in front of his new wife and his groomsmen and his college friends and my sleeping great-uncle, and he said quietly against my shoulder, I'm sorry I didn't ask. I held on to that for a second. Then I let him go. My mother found me later, near the end of the night. The string lights were still on, but the dance floor had thinned. She was holding a glass of water, which meant she had stopped drinking, which meant she was thinking clearly and had chosen to come find me anyway. She sat down beside me without asking if she could. That's always been her way. "Your father and I didn't know you were this far along," she said. "I know," I said. "You should have told us." I looked at her. I measured what I was about to say against what I had practiced saying in my head, in the hotel room, on the long nights when I was in the office until midnight and no one in my family had called. Every time I tried to explain what I was building, I said, "Someone in this family told me it wasn't real, that I was being naive, that I should get a stable job." I paused, so I stopped explaining. She was quiet for a moment. The music shifted to something slow. "We were worried," she said. "I know that too," I said. "But worried and supportive are different things. You can love someone and still make them feel like a problem to be managed." She flinched. "My mother does not like being told hard things. She has arranged her life carefully around the avoidance of them, but she didn't leave." "I am proud of you," she said. The words came out slightly stiff, like she was reading from a script she had written just now, but they came out. "Thank you," I said. We sat there for a while after that, not saying much, watching Julian and Sloane on the dance floor the last of the night. It wasn't forgiveness exactly, and it wasn't resolution. It was just two people who loved each other badly for a long time, sitting together and not leaving. That was enough for now. In the weeks that followed, I learned something about success that nobody tells you in advance. It doesn't quiet the noise. It changes the noise. The people who had spoken over me started speaking about me, to me, around me, and some of that felt like warmth, but I was old enough now to know the difference between warmth and proximity to something warm. My uncle called to congratulate me. It was a 2-minute call. He mentioned Derek once. My father sent a long email, longer than any he had written me in years, that was mostly about how proud he was and how he'd always known I had something special. I read it twice. I appreciated it and I did not fully believe it, and both of those things were okay. Faye came to San Francisco for a week and we celebrated properly. A dinner at a restaurant we'd been pricing on the menu of theoretical celebrations for 4 years, a bottle of wine neither of us could have justified before, a long night of talking about what came next. She had been the first person to believe in Meridian. She deserved the actual celebration, not the version I'd perform for my family. The acquisition closed 8 weeks after the wedding. Luminary's integration team was thoughtful, and I fought in every meeting to protect my people. The 7 employees who had built this with me, they all received equity in the transition package. That had been non-negotiable from the beginning. I had grown up watching my father talk about loyalty and reward it selectively, and I'd decided a long time ago that I would do something different with whatever I built. The day after closing, I got a voicemail from my mother. She'd heard through my aunt that I'd ensured all my employees were taken care of. "I didn't know you were that kind of person," she said in the message, and then she seemed to realize how that sounded, and she added, "I mean, I knew. You never talked about it." I saved the voicemail. I don't know why. Maybe because it was the closest thing to a real apology I was going to get, wrapped in the particular syntax my mother uses when she's trying. Julian texted me a month after the wedding. He was coming to San Francisco for a work trip and wanted to know if I'd get dinner. I said yes. We went to a pasta place in the Mission that had long communal tables and very good Negronis, and we talked for 3 hours about the company, about the wedding, about what it was like growing up in the same house and feeling like we'd grown up in entirely different ones. He told me that after the reception, on the drive back to the hotel, Sloane had said to him, "Your sister built something extraordinary and you didn't even know. What does that say about how your family pays attention?" He told me he'd thought about that question every day since. "I don't know what to do with the answer," he said. "You don't have to do anything with it right now," I said. "Just keep asking it." That felt like the right thing to say. It felt true. There's a version of the story where I end with triumph, where I stand in front of everyone at the vineyard and read the headline aloud and watch my family reorganize around the new fact of who I am. But that's not how it happened, and honestly, that's not what I wanted. What I wanted, for a long time, was to be seen. To have someone in my family say, I see what you're building, and I believe it could be real. By the time I got that, in fragments, in sideways phone calls and stiff compliments, and a brother asking the right question for the first time 3,000 miles from home, I had learned that you cannot build a company while waiting for your family to give you permission to believe in it. You have to build it anyway. You build it in the silence between phone calls that don't come. You build it on the nights when no one is watching and no one thinks to ask. And then one day the world finds out, and your family finds out, and they rearrange their faces into something that looks like pride. And you decide, quietly, privately, the way you've done everything that matters, what to do with that. I decided to forgive them. Not because they'd earned it, not because everything was resolved, but because I had spent 4 years building something from nothing, and I knew better than anyone that the hardest part isn't the work. The hardest part is not letting the weight of what people think of you collapse the structure before you're done. I am done now. The structure stands, and I did it without a single person in my family ever asking how. I used to think the hardest part of building something was the work itself. The late nights, the spreadsheets that didn't add up, the months where I paid my team before I paid myself. I thought if I could just survive that part, the invisible part, the part nobody sees, then everything after would feel like relief. What I didn't understand was that the hardest part wasn't the building. It was doing it while the people who were supposed to believe in you had already decided who you were going to be. My uncle didn't say anything cruel at that rehearsal dinner, because he was a bad person. He said it because he had looked at me my whole life and seen someone smaller than I was, and he had never once questioned whether the image he was holding was accurate. That's not malice. That's the quiet damage of people who stop paying attention and then mistake their inattention for wisdom. And my mother, when she said we were worried, she meant it. But worry without curiosity is just fear wearing a caring face. You can love someone and still refuse to ask them a real question. You can love someone and still make them feel every single holiday like a problem the family hasn't solved yet. What I know now, sitting on the other side of all of it, is that what happened to me wasn't about success proving them wrong. The $340 million didn't fix anything between me and my family. It just removed the excuse they had been using to avoid seeing me clearly. That's not the same thing as healing. That's just the removal of a barrier. The real work, the work that doesn't show up in any headline, was the 4 years I spent building Meridian while carrying the weight of their doubt like a second job. Every time my father redirected a conversation to Julian's bonus, I had a choice. Let it erode something in me or let it clarify something. I chose, eventually, to let it clarify. I chose to understand that people who have never built anything from nothing genuinely cannot imagine what it looks like from the inside. That's not a flaw in them. It's just a limit. And limits are not the same as verdicts. What I also know is this. I made sure before the deal closed that every person who had sat in that office with me, who had believed in Meridian before there was any evidence that they should, walked away with equity, because I had learned what it cost to build without a safety net, and I was not going to let the people who chose me early carry that weight alone. That decision came from something my family taught me accidentally, by not doing it. The only kind of loyalty worth having is the kind that shows up before it's convenient. Faye believed in me before there was a term sheet, before there was a product that worked consistently. Before there was anything except a whiteboard and a pitch I had rehearsed so many times I could give it half asleep. That kind of belief is rare. When you find it in a mentor, in a collaborator, in anyone, you protect it. You honor it. Not because you owe a debt, but because you understand its value in a way that people who have always been believed in never quite do. Julian asked me the right question eventually. Sloan made sure of that, and I think that's how change actually moves through families. Not through confrontations, not through headlines, but through the people we choose who push us toward the questions we've been avoiding. I'm still figuring out what my family and I are to each other now, but I know what I am to myself. That part I built on my own, in the quiet, without permission. And nothing that comes next gets to take it.